Good morning. This is Anis from Never Stop Trucking and Mikhail from Mir United. He's a very special guest. He is a freight broker, but he does other interesting stuff as well as a part of his business. Hey, good morning. It's really nice to have you. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome, Enos. Thank you for that very lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Mikhail is located in Florida, in sunny Florida. How's the weather there?
Today we finally turned. It's been cold. I know people will probably laugh at this point and say, cold is funny in Florida, but it's been, upper 40s, lower 50s. Today it's finally back into the 70s.
All right. Well, yeah, it's not warm. Let's just put it that way. It's 25 here, so
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm pretty grateful for what we get.
Okay, that's great. Well, we are going to talk about your business and the industry that you're in. There are some branches that you work in that is the same as what we do over the road trucking, but you also deal with other parts of the transportation industry. Can you tell us what you guys do?
Yeah. Look, I don't mean to be cliche, but it'd be almost easier to tell you what we don't do because of how vast our services have gotten since the inception of the company. But to keep it kind of brief and making sense, we do all aspects of supply chain. So that involves what I call full scope. Some people call it 3PL services, 4PL services. Our industry has a lot of terminology for various things within it, but the basics of it is I have knowledge and practice of how to do supply chain from the very get-go and the manufacturing side, where albeit if it's overseas or domestically located, something like that, to even final shelf. And so a lot of our work, to your point, entails some over-the-road trucking, but the majority of it is not your standard, post to DAT, call your, 53-foot dry van and provide that kind of raycon.
Okay. And as we spoke before, I'm expecting a phone call. If I get that phone call, I'll just put you on the screen and I'll mute myself and I'll be back in a minute. We are all busy here and
Of
we are
course.
it's a Monday morning, so it's very busy. Okay. So the another description of what you guys do is door to door
Yep.
business. So
Yep.
how does that work? So you have a customer that wants to ship something, let's say from here in United States, or it doesn't matter, it can be the other way around. So where do you like, and they want to ship it overseas. Where do you start? What's the first thing you do with that procedure? And can you explain the steps that are involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, for starters, I will say for all of us that have experienced any kind of over the road trucking, in comparison to what it is like in Europe, Asia, I mean, virtually everywhere else, the United States is by far the hardest. If you could do OTR here, you can do it almost anywhere else, in my opinion. I'm sure there are people out there that will disagree, but you get it. Um, Import export was what you just described. So, albeit if it's coming into the US or leaving the US, step one is actually exactly what we all do. It's picking up. You got to pick it up. So that's OTR. Um, because import export doesn't necessarily work quite the way that we have efficiencies in the US. Like for example, in the US, to go and pick up in with a dry van or a flatbed, wherever it may be, you're looking to really fill it up. There's obviously companies that do LTL, but when we've got a full truck dedicated, we usually fill it up. With an export, a lot of times you're not going to fill up the entire truck or container in this case. And to put it even lighter, most of the time you only really buy a 20-footer, and that's to fill it up. Then there's something called LCL and so on, which I'll get into a little bit later. But once you pick it up, you then need a designated warehouse. And typically, these warehouses need to be located near the port that you're exporting to. So, per se, if your client's located in Kansas, Well, you can actually export it off in the rail, and then from the rail, it'll either go east or west, depending on where your final destination is. Per se Europe, you're obviously going east. Per se Australia, you're going west, that kind of thing. China is another place you'd obviously also go west to. If you're closer to one of those edge ports, you can deliver the truck directly there. And then you start working with the warehouse on doing an export dock. Okay. This is when your warehouse, which is a domestic, it's a domestic transaction, meets your forwarder, and that's your international transaction. And your forwarders could be, there's so many out there, but some of the big ones could be expediters. We do not work with expediters. This is why I'm actually just using them as an example, other than through, some of my other clients. But expediters have NVOCC contracts, non-vessel operating common carrier. And what they do is they have these rates just like LTL. You have an LTL rate with R&L or FedEx. They have these rates with Maersk, Zims, whatever these ship lines go. You can Google, obviously, there's, if I'm not mistaken, there's about 12 that run the majority of the markets. The ones that we've all heard of are like MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company. That's one that also does cruises, so that kind of thing. Maersk is a big one. None other ones that come to mind other than those two particularly that people have heard of. And at that point, if it's an export, you get what's called a booking. It's just a number, and it is up to then for the carrier, the warehouse, to provide domestic services. Those services are, you got to receive the truck that's coming from your client. You got to offload the truck. You got to do all the stuff that makes sure, there's no damage. It's a legitimate product. Because you're taking it to export in some regard, it's on you. Making sure it's palletized properly, it's not going to fall. And then they use that booking number that Expeditors is going to get. And they go to the port and they say, hey, port, I need or rail, I need a container. And I need a container specific to this shipping line based on this booking. Great. Sign it out. It's available. Go ahead and come get it. So now this warehouse, they leave with what's called a Draymond. And that Draymond goes and picks up a chassis, or sometimes they have a private chassis, 50-50. And that Draymond goes and picks up an empty container from the rail. Takes it back to the warehouse. They load it up. Now, we can get into all the nuances of how there's different containers out there and there's different stuff because there's over-dimensional pieces and really long pieces. So how are you going to load something over time? We can get into that. But for now, just to keep it simple, it's a box, 20 feet, 40 feet. Those are the two sizes they mostly come in. You load it up, you take it to the port, and when you do either, if it's at the rail, you do a rail billing so that it knows, hey, it's going from Kansas to so on. Or when you take it directly to the port and you ingate it, it's ready for sale. And everything's linked to that expediter's booking number that they give you, right? So from there, it ships off and it leaves. And at that point, realistically, for the client, it's expediter's job to really keep everybody on top of it. But they don't. Simply put. Now, and I shouldn't speak poorly directly of a company. It's just a matter of the stereotype of the larger the company, the less hand-holding that exists. And a lot of our clients aren't the type of people that can utilize expediter services. Or rather, they can, but they don't benefit from them as much as, say, a really large company that does it instead. Make sense?
Yes.
So when that happens, a lot of times they come back to us, hey, can you help us track the shipment? Hey, can you help us track this vessel? And over time, our team's gotten very good at it. And so now we don't even, hey, yeah, we got you right away. We start immediately tracking the vessel, making sure it's up to date. Now, if our client comes to us and says, hey, we need you to do this all the way, and per se Expeditors is now my partner rather than it's the client's partner, I go to the Expediter side and they go, hey, guys, I also need this delivered to the final door. So let's per se, it goes to Spain. It docks in Barcelona. Again, keeping it simple, it's in Barcelona. The same thing that happened on the U.S. side where the trucker went and got an empty container, brought it in, it's in reverse. So now you have a trucker over here. He goes and picks up the container. delivers it to the warehouse. They, what's called strip it, take the product out. There's an entire customs process that goes through. Obviously, before it pulls the port, you do a lot of submissions and that sort of thing. I'm simplifying it incredibly from a customs standpoint. There's a lot of entry that exists on the export side. You have to make sure that it's non-DG. You have to make sure that the product's good to be sent into Spain. Most of the time, your client's already able to do it. You also need to make sure that in the country that they're in, they have the appropriate export licenses, or import licenses rather, to be able to do so. The product usually in other countries, where the tougher part is, that's not like the US, is you usually need some sort of license to specifically import a product into that country. Not always, but often, you know. So obviously, once we get through this, and even prior to the ship sailing, we file a shipper letter of instructions, an SLI, and an ISF. And that tells the ship everything that they need to know about what to do with this box once it arrives. Because sometimes we just look for cheapest. And if it's cheapest, maybe this guy goes to South Africa and it transships off and it goes up and over, right? There's a lot of different ways to do this depending on your tolerance for how much does this cost relative to how quickly do I need it.
Mm.
So it arrives, very simply put, strips, goes into a truck in Barcelona, delivers to the door. We update the client all the way through.
So let's say we're shipping a shipment from Kansas City to Barcelona. How long will it take to get from the origin to destination?
Great question. Let's presume everything is FCFS just to keep it really simple, so we don't have to do the appointment scheduling side of things. But it would take a day to actually go and load. And truly, I'd probably cut the OTR by just having the container delivered directly to the shipper. So they load up the container and we go directly to the rail. Going to Barcelona, Kansas rail to probably New York, New Jersey port, 6 days, 7 days at the very longest. Honestly, way faster than that. I'm just kind of exaggerating a little bit. And then to Barcelona, it's probably about a 14 to 16 day sail date. So there's some days that are break up, because when you're getting a booking, you can't just go and ingate the container. They'll give you the dates that you're allowed to come in. Sometimes, especially like during COVID, those dates would be months apart. You know, so if you missed your booking, you were in trouble. Now it's not so much. You miss your booking, you can pretty much get one in a week. And so, you know, there's some lag time there. Then there's some lag time between when they actually load it onto the ship and the sail. Then there's some lag time at the port when it delivers. So give or take, you're looking at about a month.
A month for the whole trip? It's not bad.
Right. You can do it faster. There's, and I'm not talking, I'm not even talking air freight, which obviously, 4 days. But I'm talking, if your client just said, hey, I got to get this out. This is mission critical. You can put it into a dry van in Kansas City, ship it to New York, New Jersey warehouse. While it's en route, get the booking, start filing the customs, get it in there. You could probably get the booking for what's called an ERD, or rather, what is it? Return date? I'm forgetting the earliest ingate date. And then you can already be done with it by the time it's ready by the time that your product has arrived at the warehouse. So I think when people,
I'll be right back.
Yeah, of course. Like I said, I'll continue mentioning around it. And actually, this is great. There's a question. How do you accurately protect all your charges to ensure that you get fully paid? Ken, great question. Several different ways. When you control the product, there are several stages of where you can hold back the product. And oftentimes we'll have gone through some sort of, credit check, customer review, something to that extent. If you're an individual importer in a different country, you're paying me for that freight before it arrives. So we'll make sure we get fully paid from that regard. If you're US based and you're a company and you've got a reasonable profile, what we'll do is we'll run a credit check. If you're willing to do it, we'll give you the option of prepaying. Sometimes, especially on that first shipment, when there's an opportunity for us to come in and we're willing to do it, we may do neither. So we somewhat hope that they're going to pay us prior to landing. But again, once it arrives, I have full discretion to say, hey, we need paid before we can release this. And that doesn't matter if it's going to overseas or if it's coming back into here. Appreciate that question very much. That is top of mind, and most people don't think that through when it comes to the international side.
Okay, and I'm back. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay,
I answered. I don't know if you heard me, but I answered Ken's question in the comments.
Ken is a regular here, and he always has great questions. And thanks for answering that. Now, does it make more sense for you as a broker or the customer to put the freight from Kansas City on a train or on a truck financially? Which one do you think financially is obviously rain is longer, but which one makes more sense as far as the financials go?
Again, great question. This is going to sound a bit maybe cast, but it doesn't matter truly. From a financial sense, if we talk about time and money in both regards, the difference in rail to truck right now, I would have to look at the spot market to truly get it. I want to, off the top of my head, obviously going to be cheaper in the rail. I mean, I would think at least. And if it's not, obviously it makes much more sense to go truck. But from a spot, if we're just checking it, it really depends on the client. So it's important that you're getting a good fact-finding session up front when you're doing the sales, so you get an idea of how they tolerate that. Or you ask the question directly, hey, what do you need? Do you need to get this in faster? Or, but if we're talking, once we talk longer distances, because Kansas City to, if we're going to Barcelona, I mean, what is it? 1,200 miles?
It's around 1,200 miles, yeah. Around, yeah.
So a good broker is paying maybe $3,000 to the truck, especially in the storm, you're probably paying 36.
Right.
So what's a rail going to be? 22, 24 is what I'm guessing. Again, it could be more. Rails spot markets,
Unfortunately, right now, the rates, we are seeing a slight increase in rates right now, but it's probably going to be like around like $2, $2.50 per mile. Even though it's East Coast, it traditionally used to pay much better to East Coast, but right now only just a little bit. So, but hopefully that will improve.
Yeah, agreed, man, very much.
Yeah. So now I'm an immigrant, and I have a lot of family and friends here and in Bosnia, in Balkans area, and they all talk about. And I know a lot of people who would send shipments over there. Some of them would send cars.
Yep.
Some of them send other things like furniture, tools, other things. And there is also a shipping service, I think, based in Chicago that does that. You can send packages, big boxes, and they pick them up and they send them. But for them, it takes like at least 2 months. I think they consolidate everything. They take all these boxes to Chicago and they put them on a container or something.
Yeah.
So I have some knowledge about as far as the cars go, how that works. So what they would do is they would put them on a container, probably send them to Chicago, put them on rail, send them to one of those ports on East Coast, and then the ship would go through Mediterranean Sea and then to Adriatic Sea, come inside, because there is this one port in Croatia called Ploče. That's really near close to Bosnian, Bosnian Croatia. You know about that, okay? And then they would do the customs, and then from then there's a lot of procedure, because all those countries in Eastern Europe, there's a lot of bureaucracy. It's just hard. But I know that sometimes it can take a long time. They take that car out, for example, and then they need to ship them. And same with those packages. It takes another 2-3 weeks to do that. Do you see the same things in other countries, or is it?
Yeah, very much. Well, I should say in other countries, it just kind of depends. In Europe, you get away with a little bit more. They're a little more lax. The closer you get towards the Middle East, that's when you start to really get pressure for almost anything, because they manufacture so much over there themselves. So it starts to become a little questionable. Why are you importing this lithium battery and we've got plenty of them, available here, for example? So there is a lot of that holdup. Cars, autos specifically are very tough. I do a lot of export. We don't do the door to door. In fact, I've got a Tesla in our yard sitting right now that we offloaded, waiting to just get the heads up from the drive. He's importing into Odessa, but it's going through Turkey, and he has the license. So to us, we'll get it. He just said, "I just want you to get it to the port. Everything else is on us." Makes it a lot easier in that regard. So because the countries you're mentioning, like once you get into that area, much tougher. Toughest countries to import into, be shocked, Mexico. Mexico is by far the hardest place I've ever had to get anything in. We got dangerous goods, not the way that sounds, maybe a little bit, again, cast, but we got DG product, like UN 3804 lithium batteries into the Middle East. I was not able to clear a water fountain into Mexico. Not kidding.
So when you go to Mexico, it's land, like you put it on a truck, you just have to cross the border, right?
Well, that's in the US, but imagine also, they buy quite a bit elsewhere. Mexico, a lot of people don't realize just how large of an economy. I mean, Mexico in the next 5 years is going to be the number 3 economy in the world. It's being backed by China on one side, it's being backed by US on the other side. Like, you've got this buildup coming, and already you're seeing that the imports made it. But then, just they have really tough tariffs on certain things. Like, don't quote me exactly on this, but I'm pretty sure the tariff for Chinese made shoes is like 200% because they don't want that stuff in their market. They have a 16% VAT on everything. And I think like the only exclusion to that may be some things with food and some things with like humanitarian aid, of course. But otherwise, there's the value added tax to every single shipment. And we were importing these very large batteries, solar panels. These solar panels do this process of turning air into water. And in Mexico, that's very needed. And I was trying to explain to them, they're like, why are you importing this water fountain? I'm like, because this solar panel makes water. It doesn't dispense water. Like, we need something to dispense the water out. I'm like, no, this particular brand is not allowed in Mexico. So our client, which was a company called Source, told their client, who was Nestle, to buy one in Mexico to dispense this out of. And they literally, they went to a Home Depot, bought virtually the same thing, had somebody fly down from Source to install it and do everything else. Because
well, I admit I was a little bit close-minded when because I forgot that you probably do imports from other countries into Mexico. I'm thinking from here. So, but yeah, there you go. Now I understand it. Now let me ask you this question. I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about that, but what about cartels in Mexico? Is that
it's a real thing. Your rates are very much dependent on what the area that you're crossing across is. We do a lot of deliveries to Yucatan, so like up in the Horn when it comes down through from Laredo. Guadalajara is a very dangerous area, and your rate is very much according to it. There is no LT. Well, I mean, there is, but there really isn't an LTL option for that reason, because the cartel will take it. You also have to remember the cartel, while very intelligent, is not going to take your battery from you. That's not one that's going to make water out of it.
They don't need that.
Right.
They just need some money to like to let it go through.
Yeah, something they could take and make into money quickly. So, if you're transporting, gasolina, you're probably going to have an armed person in that truck. Transporting, a solar panels. We threw it on the back of like a Conestoga, Mexican Conestoga.
Okay, all right. Um, Now Ken is also asking if you wanna, if you can. I'm gonna show it here on the screen. The
Yeah.
question.
So what you do is something unique. I thought most larger overseas shipments move port to port because most forwarders do not want to deal with complaint. Yeah, I would argue that what we do is unique. You know, I'm always careful to compliment myself. But I think that there is a very large, very, very large market. It's a middle tier company that maybe is very established even in the US and has 150 million to 800 million dollars worth of operation, but they're still in this ballpark where procurement and logistics aren't two wings of the same bird. There is procurement, and that's the buyer, and they are the ones that typically don't want to deal with this at all. They're like, just we're FOB. Everyone's heard of it. We're FOB, and that's actually what they mean. They mean like even the overseas stuff. Like, no, they just deliver it to us. I don't deal with that. I just schedule. That's what they want. In reality, there is a lot of people that are looking for help because they don't get updates. They don't get proper cadence and communication. They don't know how to do it. So when their bosses come to them, they are kind of throwing their hands in the air. So imagine being in a meeting with a multi-billion-dollar company where you're handling, you know, if you think about it, supply chain, 10% of the overall revenue. And you're just like, I don't know where the shipment is. It becomes tough. And so when you're in that position, it becomes necessary, even if all we do get paid for is just the drayage or just the domestic portion, it becomes necessary for them to come to us. And I would say most of our clients, if not all, did not start as door to door. They come to us for a particular service. We get recommended for something, usually in the domestic world. Expedite is one we're very good at. Warehousing is one we're really good at. Drayage is one we're really, really good at. It's kind of where I had to start with. And over time, because we do the things like I mentioned at the beginning, where we give them updates on their vessel, we give them updates on their bookings, they start realizing, wouldn't it just be easier to consolidate, kind of come to you?
Yeah, yeah. So what, and in connection to Ken's question, what made you, I mean, it might be a cliche question, but what made you actually go into this particular area of business? Because most of us want to concentrate, like what we do here is over the road, and we only want to work with semi trucks because that's what we know. If I get a lot of people calling me, hey, you know, I have a box truck or a sprinter van or something special, like some kind of special equipment. I just can't because I don't have the you know, the work for that. I don't have any customers, and I'm not particularly interested in that. But what you do is a lot of these things connected together. So what and how did you start with that? Because isn't that like that? That's a big step to. Does it take a long time to add some of these services, or do you just go all in at once?
No, very much piece by piece. I started by necessity. It's a longer story, but I'm happy to share it. And while I share it, I'm actually going to answer Michael James's question, where he said, "Do you guys have dedicated lanes all the time?" And particularly to the business model we run, no, we don't. We have some. I mean, like 10% of our clients give us dedicated lanes. One of our biggest clients does, but we don't do their door to door. We just do their drayage and a little bit of OTR comparatively to how large they are. But no, we don't. And actually part of the business model has always been, I much rather be your plan B, because some of these companies, they have these dedicated lanes. It's going to come from China to LA. It's going to go from LA to their distribution center, and then they're going to pick up. Good. Keep it. We don't want to step foot on that. We do, but maybe not right away. And a lot of times they come as, oh my gosh, we have this, urgent shipment. Can you help us? We come in to save the day in a lot of ways. And what that does for me is it allows me to add a little bit of honest margin, and it keeps everybody very happy. So we're not so constricted to having to do it within a certain dollar level and also executes. There's a little bit more concentration on the execution side. And the reason, to go back, as I was saying, that I designed my business this way was by necessity. I worked at a very large broker prior to coming on board with Tallgrass Freight as an agent. When I originally did so, after having taken the full 365-day non-compete that I signed a contract for, the company that I used to work for still came after and sued me. And they sued me for non-solicit, and I really hope any broker that is thinking about leaving, at least as it knows that this is how they go about it, because knowledge is power at a minimum. So obviously when we think non-solicit, we think clientele. And I did not go after a single client that I had in the past. I also made sure to stay away from any possible clients that my former employer had. Like, obviously, of course, they're very large and they probably have every client in their book of business, so to speak. But I'm talking about like ones you obviously know they're moving with. I'm not going to go after the PepsiCos. I'm not going to go after, someone's, because I heard people be doing this, but we had one guy who did, he had 100K a month in margin with this one client. Like, I'm obviously not going to go after that client, even though we all, know who it is, blah, blah, blah. The way that they come after you is in a very, very tricky manner. So these big box brokerages, they have not just clients, but also trucks in their sales repertoire. And what they'll tell you, and what they'll tell the judge or the arbitrator, however your contract's set up, is that you are selling away. And that's the contract term. You're selling away from the company by taking these trucks to move your load. Grass even said, hey, maybe wait a year, like wait 2 years. I'm like, no, this isn't happening. I loved what I was doing at the time. I was teaching tennis. You kind of get a little philosophical about it at a certain point. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, am I really bringing purpose? I had the fire. I wanted to do this. And so I remember one time, this guy, his name is Ross. We won't go any further than that. Told me about how to do drayage, because this guy, to this day, best logistics broker of all time. Best logistics coordinator of all time. He worked on a book. He ran basically the entire book and was able to help half an office run theirs. He just knew everything somehow. He taught me how to do drayage. And it's actually quite simple in where you get your carriers and everything else. And so I just remembered, I'm like, okay, I know how to do drayage. So who can I speak with that needs drayage services? And to Ken's point, forwarders and shippers don't typically want to deal with stuff once it gets to the port. They kind of want to hand it off in some way. Overseas, it's really simple just to go and pick up. Here, it's really hard. So really want hands off. So a lot of times what they do is they get terms to the port. Okay, Incoterms. Without getting in an incredible tangent, I just highly recommend, if you take nothing else away from what I'm saying, everybody should Google the term Incoterms and learn what they mean, because you will be able to handle objections to your OTR quite a bit with that. When I figured out that this was a forwarder's opportunity, luckily enough, he's awesome. His name is Damon. He owns Tallgrass. He founded it. That was his market. He knew how to work with forwarders. And so honestly, I actually asked him for some help, and he gave me a little bit of generic advice, but also kind of, hey, this is how you do it. This is the process. You need to make sure you know what a delivery order is. It's kind of like your BOL. You need to tell them, hey, I can actually create one for you. He did it within his CRM. He knew how to create a DO. So cool. Like, the first time I did it, these people were like in awe. Like, oh my gosh, wow, good for you. You know how to do this. So he gave me through that, but his generic advice was pick up the goddamn phone. This thing right here, this will earn you more than you can ever imagine. And so I did. I started calling forwarders, and once I got a little bit of the hang of the language and understanding of what they're needing, I started looking into drayage and warehousing. And actually, my first deal was warehousing. It was a cold storage warehouse I had to do in Baltimore. And I would say about a year in, we were doing nothing crazy, 15, 20 a month in margin. It was better than I had done in years. So, like, wow, everything was incredible. I was learning a little bit further in the process, and we got a call from someone that said, hey, there's this container that we have on stilts that's sitting in a dock, and somebody ran into it. Like, I'm thinking, no, my trucker didn't run into it. I'm like, on Trucker Tool, I'm like, okay. I was like, it wasn't my driver, right? She's like, no. It was somebody else, and it was a normal car, da da da. But the container's now sitting on the car. Do you know what to do? I'm like, yeah, just call a crane. Like, immediately just go, yeah, I can take care of it. I'll get a crane service out there. Call the crane service. I had a little bit of money in my pocket. I paid with my credit card, did the markup, and now all of a sudden we offer crane services. Now we do now about two, 3 a week, different projects that require different size cranes. One of my employees is brilliant in the knowledge of what he knows how to do. But turning it back, that's how it all started. So over time, I started building up relationships with forwarders. I started learning what their business was, how they got clients overseas, which ultimately is like agents. Really, it's just agents overseas are running around. They're kind of getting their clients. Then they're coming here saying, hey, Mr. Forwarder, Mrs. Forwarder, what's an ocean rate to get it into here? Can you get me to the door? And then these forwarders come to the broker and they say, hey, yeah, like, how do you do this? What is it going to cost? After COVID, you see a lot. After COVID, you've seen a lot more of forwarders go direct to truckers. And most of that has to do with because the rates dropped off and brokers didn't drop their rates off. We did, luckily enough. I had very little to do with that. Miss Cammie was the brilliant mind behind that. She came to us, said, hey, like, I'm seeing the market drop. We aren't going to be able to keep charging what we're charging. Everyone else is going to probably do the same. People aren't going to drop as quickly. I recommend that we go about this now. And so we did. We took a bit of a hit. It was a tougher year, but we kept literally every client that stayed in business. I hate to say that, but it was due to that kind of following the market, understanding the business, and then following the trends of these forwarders. Like, they'll tell you, like, be like, God, this is expensive, or I'm getting complaints from overseas for the total price. Can you do something about this? You have to find a way. And the way is to expand your carrier base. So that's what we did. We started finding more Draymond and more carriers and more of that. And so over time, we were able to, there's not a port that I couldn't offer you a service outside of, like, we're not great in New Mexico. So you actually have to go to Santa Teresa just to get anything out there anyway. Short of that, man, we can cover anything anywhere.
Okay. So what about the part once the product gets overseas and gets not unloaded yet, because there's a lot of other paperwork like customs and import paperwork. But what about that side of the business? Do you have to have a contact over there? Is there a language barrier? How do you guys make sure that everything is fine on that end?
Yeah, great question. And again, very dependent on the country. You sometimes have to have the agent over there. Not sometimes. You always have to have some representation over there, but the way that it's filed, like, for example, for autos in Bosnia, it absolutely has to be the agent there. There's a certain way to file. The way that it by container is the way that customs often works. That's why you see a lot more stuffed into one container as opposed to potentially looking to kind of spread it out. So you have to make sure that all of that is in a row. But I will tell you this, if you are still doing customs when your shipment lands, you are in big trouble. There's a problem. You need to clear that before it lands. And usually, like, what ends up happening is you get all the paperwork in, it arrives, and you go online to check and you see your holds. And it could be anything from, like, a line hold, and that could be, as the forwarder or as the shipper, like, someone didn't pay someone. So now you got to find out what's happening. And to an earlier question, when someone said, "Hey, how do you make sure?" I think it was Ken, that you get paid in full. There's a lot of other steps. There's a lot of other people making sure they get paid in full too. So they'll stop it sometimes as well, which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
There's custom sold is the most obvious one. That's the one where you're like, "Hey, I didn't do the paperwork right, or something came up, or this got held." There's exam holds, which you gotta get an exam, you know. But once it arrives, to kind of answer, I think, the question you're about to ask, what happens next? Very similar to kind of what we do here. You hire a warehousing company that will pick up the container. It'll take it in, and once it takes it in, strips the container, returns the container back, lets us know, what they all received, and then from there they move into final delivery. And a lot of Europe, Barcelona, something like that, you're seeing more box trucks than you are the larger
Yeah.
trailers.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We have a couple of questions here in the chat,
Yeah.
and I do have a couple of more questions. And I know we have like 15 more minutes left. If you have to go, I understand. So there was a question from Paul. I think. Do you also help look for buyers?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of my clients tend to do similar avenues of purchasing, and it depends on obviously the industry that we're in. But yeah, absolutely, I try and connect people together. One of my down here, I work with some assets directly. One of our top, they're not the client, but there's an intermediary. But one of our top fulfillers is the cruise lines. So anyone that makes a product that I think would be a good option on a cruise line, we try and connect with right away. And so that's typically a buyer for the cruise line and a manufacturer from overseas or even domestically.
Okay. And then we have a question from Emro. He's here. We're working together here.
Yeah.
And he's asking if you won that lawsuit.
So arbitration is technically the term for it. So they term it that way so that there is no win or loss. I would say I very much won because it came down to I did not owe any money to them. My lawyer did an amazing job. I got to shout out Nick if he does hear this at some point. But it's like when you look at it pragmatically, no, but absolutely. I learned all of this because by necessity, and now my firm is where it is entirely because of that initial lawsuit. I don't think that I would have ever moved out of full truck if I didn't have to. It's what I do, and initially it didn't make sense to move out of it.
Okay. Well, the thing with lawsuits is that most smaller companies are very much scared of them. It's not really if you're gonna win or not. It's just that it's gonna cost you a lot, and it would make you go out of business. That's why most people are afraid of that. And I think a lot of these companies who will proceed to do with that kind of tactic, they even though they may not win the lawsuit, win it, or they might be counting of you just giving up because it's going to cost you a lot, and that's their way of pressuring you.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I would say for anyone that is looking to leave and to start their own agency or start their own brokerage, I highly recommend you have about 35,000 saved up for a decent lawyer. Do not cross your non-compete. Just not needed. Even though they said even though they made them like not legal, I would not still. It's still the lawsuit. To your point, they could still sue you. Take the year. Don't keep in touch with the people you're not supposed to keep in touch with, and then just start over. Don't go back to the people that you're going to win back to. Start over. Figure it out. Hopefully, it works.
Okay. How do those people even find out that you're doing what you're doing? Like if not in any particular sense, but like in general terms, like this is a big large company and you're small, you're just starting. How do they even find out?
Well, so the interesting thing is they don't have to find out. It's not it's not like a federal criminal case. it's not you're innocent until proven guilty. You're guilty. Like, you are guilty until proven innocent in a civil case. So they can sue you and extract money out of you and make you pay before you're even wiser to it. So that's really the problem. It's not, to your point, like, they can legally stronghold you until you don't have money. It's just unfortunate. And I was lucky. I had a great lawyer. I also did all the stuff that I just mentioned. Like, I did not, again, obviously I didn't know the non-solicit thing, but I did not contact anyone that I used to work with. I did not touch my book for a year. I didn't do anything that was against my contract until it became clear that what they did, the way that they filed it. So that's why I say start over and make sure that you're really starting over.
Okay. Michael is asking how many employees are working for you. So I might even rephrase this question, like, how many employees does it take to do something like this?
Yeah. Look, very tough to answer depending on everyone's book. I have 6 individuals that work for me on the logistics and a few of the other operational sides that we have. I know I'd mentioned a few of them, but Cami and Jose are the 2 primaries. They're the ones that handle our book of business from the very get-go when a client requests a quote. Lisa, Jairo, and Maggie, they are amazing in execution. They handle both the international updates and consulting side, the domestic side, are everything from LTL, expedite, full truck. Maggie, on top of which, handles a few different roles. She also handles our mental health. Believe it or not, within our company, we have somebody that does bi-weekly mental health sessions where we just talk through it. And her having a vast knowledge of logistics brokerage allows us to kind of speak the same language. And then Yana is most recently come in, and she's helping us do, a variety of different things. She's helped us with our social media. We're about to launch some commercials. We're doing some additional marketing and that sort of thing. And then my right-hand salesman, Jay, who he's our vice president of business development. He's helped bring on our second largest client, which is a forwarder that has been amazing and taught me so much, alongside, a few others as well. And the guy's just awesome. He's a 40, I don't want to misquote it. So he's 40 something is all I'm going to say, but he's probably one of the coolest, best golfers I've ever played with.
Okay. And what do you do?
Yeah. Right. Like, yeah.
Are you the sales guy? Yeah. Are you the face of the company? What do you do if you have people like here? When I started by myself, and there is 3 of us. So we kind of have our own roles. And when you're by yourself, you have to do everything. But once you grow, what do you do then as the the founder of the company?
Yeah. So there's 2 particular roles. Client success, that kind of thing, just keeping up with clients. You can't leave. You have to be around. You have to know what's going on. And I take a particular interest in almost every load that we do. I need to have some baseline knowledge of everything that's going on. I look at our CRM hourly to make sure that things are flowing. I go through our notes and I make comments within emails so that people know I'm still around. And the second bit is sales. Yeah, absolutely. I have everything from cold calling to this trip to India that you and I talked about at the very beginning, which is ultimately a prospecting meeting. I would consider it that way, but it's the way that I do social selling. So I'm going out there to meet people that are going to introduce us. And I've gathered about a dozen of the introductory people to run a half marathon in Mumbai with me.
Okay, well, that's good for you. I ran for about 2 years and I stopped. I guess I'm just being lazy, but running is really great. I was never, I didn't never ran that much, but still, like, run 2, 3, 4 miles. That's good enough for me. So that's
definitely,
yeah.
Man. I didn't like running up until about last year. Like, I've been doing it I got into it after letting myself go. But I played college tennis and I was in great shape then. But then I was so burnt out, I did nothing for a bunch of years. And I put on a decent bit of weight. So that was why I started again. And it took me about 5 or 6 years. And then I finally fell back in love with it. So yeah, man, go run a mile.
Yeah, running is great. It just clears your mind and your spirit. And then when you mentioned that company therapist, everyone, I think everyone in transportation needs a therapist.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
really good idea to like, hey, it's okay, it's gonna be better.
You know, we have tangible like evidence that she helps. It's not just, you know, it's not just all rose-colored glasses. We have, and obviously I would never name them, but we have contacts of clients that are difficult, for a variety of reasons. Their job's probably just as difficult. We think it's us or something, but they're difficult. And a lot of times when we're frustrated with somebody, even if they are difficult, that is a reflection in us in some ways. And just knowing that I know that alone gets me through virtually every difficult circumstance that I, come across. And she taught us that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's great. Well, here's a comment from Ken, and I have one more question, and then I'll let you go. Uh, Ken says, "I never would have thought using a supplier would be considered breaking a solicitation agreement. You must have been shocked."
Yeah. You know, when you're when you look at a contract and you see things phrased in a certain way, it's one of the lessons I learned is it's very important to ask. Um, they continued, if I recall correctly, because I don't have the contract anymore, but selling away was the common term. And
Right.
so it doesn't matter if you're selling a client away or you're selling a vendor, supplier away. If they could have taken advantage of that, and the simplicity is if they could have taken advantage of that and now they cannot, you've lowered the supply. You lowered the supply, you've raised the equilibrium market rate. And
Hmm.
that's selling away.
Okay. All right. I had one more question for you, and when you mentioned tariffs, what do you think if the next president goes away and does what he's threatening to do? I've tried to think about it because I don't have much experience. I read other people's opinions about it. We don't even know if he's going to do that or not. But what do you think? How will that affect everything that we do here?
Yeah. So this is a topic I'm pretty passionate about. As long as you have more than an hour, I can go a little bit over. So because this is
I
something
have
I
I have time. I have
great,
time.
great. This is something I can talk about quite vastly. But let's term it the correct way to start: increase in tariffs. Tariffs are here. So if you have any doubt that you've been paying tariffs, let's extinguish that now. Virtually every single thing made in China has a 25% tariff. That has been going on for many, many years. The entire Biden administration, it's been happening. So the question now is an increase in tariffs and whether or not these are going to be real. And when I say real, I mean realized in the prices that we pay. Because one thing that just even basic economics says is tariffs are not paid by the companies, they're paid by the consumers. Companies just pass it through in the form of a tax by adding it to the price. Okay. Now, let's take a step back and think about the people that are most affected, not the people rather, but the companies that are most affected by this. Okay. Your Walmarts, your Dollar General, your really large multi-billion dollar Fortune 500 companies, right? Okay. So when we just think of that for a second and we think about who are the people that run those companies, there's some of the most intelligent human beings on the planet. Maybe not necessarily individually intelligent, but from a managerial standpoint, they will hire the right teams, as by evidence, because they're around and always making money. They will delegate the stuff that they need to delegate, and they'll take the stuff on that they need to. So these incredibly smart people who are not us logistics brokers that will wait till the last second to roll the dice and gamble everything, they are much smarter. When we've seen this inflation that's hit and we think about the dollars that are printed, from the original Trump administration when we needed to make up for people that were unemployed due to the lockdowns, things like that, et cetera, et cetera. When that happened, they printed about 40% more dollars. So just cut it there and just say everything now is 40% more expensive, right? Well, it's not. It's more than 40% more expensive. Some of this stuff is 60, 70, 80% more expensive. Where do you think that's come from? That's come from the same tolerances that one may get when they scale a mountain. You got to stop little by little every year, and the price just keeps going up. And you need to acclimate. And that's what they've done to us. They've acclimated us a little too fast, clearly, as can be seen by social media. But from that acclimation, you're now seeing 70, 80, 90% increases in prices. Companies were so, I'm not going to say greedy because that's not the term for it, but so aggressive in rising that price that they've now even toned it back, to kind of scale back. I think they kind of realized, hey, we can't margin the same. We were percentage. We margin the same dollars, but not the same percentage. Okay? Which, by the way, has its own problems. But so whether or not he increases these tariffs, I don't know that we're going to be as affected as a lot of these people, as a lot of the furthest sides tend to claim, both on the positive and the negative side. Like, look, I just did a project for someone that imported about $100 million worth of equipment at 25% tariffs on every single item. They paid $25 million in taxes. That same equipment was 10x the cost to be manufactured in America. It was 3x the cost to be manufactured in Australia. It was like 11x in Japan. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. The stuff's still going to be manufactured there. Maybe not in China, but in Mexico by China. And if you don't think they already have warehouses there in Ensenada, make a couple calls.
Okay, so so they are passing the prices as always on to the consumers. So that project is an example: $100 million, and then pay $25 million in those taxes or tariffs. They obviously pass it to people who buy the equipment here, and they're willing to pay it because it costs much more for them to produce it here anyway, right? So they
Exactly.
go away with that. Now, what? Okay, so I understand it's hard to tell what this is going to do to economy, but what do you think it's going to, like, not just to us as people who work in logistics, but to the average consumer? What
Great
do you think?
question. Yeah. So now we need to look at, so the companies I just mentioned were all your your Fortune 500 kind of companies. If you scale back and look at the companies that, good logistics brokers work with, they're pretty niche. You know what I mean? They have like something specific that they may provide. It could be a part, it could be a full thing, but it's something for very specific, fencing, um, scaffolding, that sort of thing. When you look at those middle market, middle class companies, that's your true sign of where the economy is going. I have seen an uptick in buying, both building material and consumer goods. I have seen an uptick in uh, prospects looking to move and move into the U.S. and start doing business in the U.S. So between those two variables, I foresee rates going up for trucking, and I see the economy. I think the economy is in a fairly decent shape as it is. I wouldn't say it's in the greatest shape of all time. It's in good shape. I think it's being driven a lot by consumer confidence. I think there's still like a hoorah from Trump kind of getting elected and that sort of thing that's happening, even though there's obviously a bit of a sad wave as well. But I think it's kind of being dragged up. He enters this week, so it's kind of like we'll see. But I think it's going to be good signs. Uh, Based on the buying patterns I'm watching, it seems good.
Okay, so we did see from the beginning of this year, Emro and I and Chris, we have been talking about, and we noticed that the rates are going up a little bit. And I've been watching. I've been meaning to do a video about the trends that I'm seeing. Like I'm watching LinkedIn, I'm watching Reddit. As far as freight brokers, a lot of them are complaining about these prices, but it's what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
You do think that this trend is going to continue? It's not going to go back to what it was in 2024 and 23.
I mean, we may bottom back out, but I see it coming back up.
You
I
see?
think there's going to be weeks now where there's just still a fight. Which is interesting. Like, personally, my opinion is the right freight broker isn't there to artificially get the price down. Like, sure, I mean, of course, we're trying to kind of come down, but I think it's to accurately help your client understand why the price is what it is and get the trucker paid efficiently, not cheap. But, everyone has their own schools of thought. I see kind of like the typical weight loss trend where, you gain a little weight before you lose a little weight, before you gain a little weight, before you lose a little weight. And so I think overall we'll see a positive uptick, but you're still going to have weeks where you're shocked. You're like, I can't believe the rates are worth it right now.
Okay. So did I understand correctly about the tariffs that Trump is about to increase? Do you think that will work positively for the economy? Because you said that you're seeing some prospects moving in here. Some of the, like you think that might actually have a positive effect?
Well, so I would say no. I mean, I think it's a pretty common knowledge to say, additional tariffs are not good for the consumer because it's technically increase in prices. My argument per se to it is simply that we have already been acclimated to the new prices, and the relative increase that could come, even if he does increase the tariffs, is not going to have any kind of impact one way or the other on us. I think that the prospect of increased tariffs has hurt our economy, our ability to buy just groceries and rent, So my hope is obviously it does not further increase, but I'd at least like to think that people should not be, they shouldn't be so concerned about that portion. There's a lot of other things that is going to affect the economy in the next 3 to 4 months.
Okay. Well, thanks for summarizing. You gotta talk to me like to a 7-year-old, not so
I don't know
I can
about that, man.
comprehend all that.
No,
Okay.
you're excellent.
Well, we've been on for 1 hour, and I think this is you made some really great points. I learned a lot. Thank you very much for being here and answering the questions and giving us this new perspective and giving us hope that the transportation industry might actually recover.
Indeed. I'm happy that that's what you took away. Thank you. Seriously, this amazing platform. I'm glad we're able to connect. I'm available anytime.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mikhail. Thanks everyone for watching, and hopefully we can sometime in future do another one of these and where we're gonna be talking about like this business. Like we can't really catch up, man. This is crazy, right?
I love it.
Okay.
Man, your positive attitude makes me reassured.
Thanks, Mikhail.